this is going to be a tier list for tank races. And what is going to be the best tank race now and in the High Isle patch as well. So there isn't really any changes to tank race going into next patch. But this is a common question. We still get asked the same thing now. Now, one thing I do want to make pretty clear is when it comes to tank race, there is no meta tank race in regards to you need to have this to perform better as a tank. When it comes to damage dealers, they have to choose a specific class that's going to provide them with the most damage. And the same for healers, they choose a race that is going to provide the most benefit in that situation. When it comes to tanking, you can actually tank with any race. It doesn't make that much of an impact in the grand scheme of things. However, you might as well pick a race that is going to benefit you in some kind of way. So there are some that help more than others. So we're going to start off this list with the High Elf, and we're going to try and look at all the benefits of each race. I'm going to try and give you the kind of positives of every race. So first of all, High Elf. So with a High Elf, you are going to get Restore Magicka and Stamina, which is quite nice with Spell Recharge. This can occur once every 6 seconds. So when you activate an ability, you restore 625 Magicka or Stamina based on whichever is lowest. Once every 6 seconds. So this is obviously pretty useful because it's a stamina gain. And this is also while blocking. So pretty useful. We also get Max Magicka 2000 and we get spell damage. So on the positive side of things, we've got a way of restoring resources. We also have Max Magicka, which is okay. This can be slightly problematic because obviously when it comes to sorting out your stats, making sure your stamina's higher, making sure you've got enough health, having 2k Max Magicka in there can cause a little bit of a problem sometimes. But overall, there are some useful things in there to help us. The weapon and spell damage will boost our healing, but it's not the most useful stat that we need as a tank. So, for this reason, and these reasons, for the High Elf, I'm going to kind of put it midway for now, and we'll maybe reevaluate things afterwards. So, for High Elf, we're going to go straight down the middle, because it's not completely useless if we look at it from a tank perspective, but there's also things in there that are a bit of a waste. Next, we've got Argonian. Now, Argonian is an interesting one because you've got increased healing done, which is somewhat helpful. Argonian resistance, which gives us max health and poison and disease resistance. So the resistance isn't that vital. The max health is nice, the 1000 max health. Then the resourceful passive is where the Argonian really starts to shine. So you've got max Magicka and max stamina, 1000 of each. So overall, we're going to do 3000 max stats, 1000 of each. But then when you drink a potion, you restore 3125 health, Magicka and stamina. So the Argonian is a very, very good option for tanks because of the sustain benefits. The only trouble is that it requires you to use a potion to get those sustained benefits. So there are some situations where that might not be the best option. So let's say we're thinking of newer players. If a newer player was to go Argonian, they could potentially miss out on that resourceful passive because as a newer player, they might not realise that they have to be using potions on cooldown to be making a benefit from using Argonian. Now, if you don't use potions on cooldown, every second that you're not using a potion, you are diminishing the value of the racial passive. So it is a good option. It is one of the better options to choose, but I don't think it's S tier because it has the waste potential because you might not drink a potion on cooldown. As soon as you don't drink that potion, it becomes a bit of a waste. But the healing done is helpful. The max stats is really nice. You don't get as many max stats as some other races though. So some races will have 2000 stamina, 2000 health. So 4,000 in total. This is only giving 3,000. You get that nice resource boost, but only from drinking a potion. So it costs you money to benefit from the ratio passive. You physically have to use a potion. So for that reason, I'm putting this in the A tier for tank race. Everyone's favourite, the Bosma, also known as a Wood Elf. I've been heavily critical of the Wood Elf in the past, and those of you that watch me on Twitch will have seen me play my Wood Elf Templar tank. I've done trials with that character, hard modes, no problem, dungeons, all sorts of content. One of the reasons why I do that is the Templar is one of the, like, generally one of the lower end classes to play because it provides not very much. They kind of can be tricky to play, and then obviously the Wood Elf being one of the worst races, that combination, I try to use that to kind of show people on stream that you can virtually use anything when it comes to tanking, and it's more about the player skill level rather than your tank race and your tank class. Those are things that you can get away with. It doesn't matter what selection you use, you can still do content. Is it the best option? No, it's not. So the things we're going to get here, the Hunter's Eye passive is a bit of a waste. So stealth detection, not useful. Increased movement speed is useful. So we get 5% increased movement speed, which is actually quite nice for tanking. We get the physical and spell pen, which is not that useful. We get the stamina recovery, which is not useful, but then we do have the 2000 max stamina. It is really a bit of a waste in terms of the detection radius. We're not making use of it. We're not making use of the pen. We're not making use of the recovery. The poison and disease resistance is okay, but not really that valuable. I would still say, all things considered, it would still be a D, because the only thing we're really benefiting from is 5% movement speed and 2k max stam. But it's, if you wanted to choose it, you still absolutely could. Right, next, we have the Breton. So with a Breton, we get max magicka. We get spell resistance. We get double the amount of spell resistance if we are afflicted with burning, chill, or concussion. We get magicka recovery. And we also get reduced magicka cost of abilities. So when we think about it this way, as a tank, you mostly use magicka abilities. The max magicka can be a slight issue. Like I mentioned before with the high elf. It can be a little bit of an issue because it means that you might not be able to hit those numbers that you want to reach in terms of your stamina and your max health. But I mean, it shouldn't be that much of an issue. So max magicka is okay. The spell resistance is somewhat useful. The magicka recovery is really nice, and the magicka cost reduction of abilities is very good. So when we think about it that way, it's definitely, it's better than the high elf, but it's probably not quite as valuable as the Argonian. If you are playing a frost staff build though, this would probably be quite good to have the max magicka and to have the magicka cost reduction and the spell resistance. There's three things that are going to be useful, especially if you're going with a frost staff build. If you go double frost staff, I would consider using a Breton in that situation. So I'm going to put it in B, and I'm going to move my elf down because there is a few more useful perks to using a Breton than a high elf. Okay, next we've got the Domna, which is also known as a dark elf. And for this one, you've got increased max magicka and max stamina. So 1,910 of each, which is okay. We've got flame resistance, and it's a lot of flame resistance. It's like 4,620, which is a lot. However, whenever you've got a specific resistance towards a certain type of damage, it's not that valuable. Let's say you're at 33k spell resistance. That means that your flame resistance is absolutely useless. So it's not going to make any difference in a situation where you're in a fight with flame damage. If you're already at 33,000 spell resistance, the flame resistance isn't doing anything. So to make any sort of use from 4,600 flame resistance as a tank, you're going to need to be quite low down on your overall resistances. It can be easily wasted. You've then got increased your weapon and spell damage, which again isn't a massive amount of use in terms of the real benefit. Like you're going to boost, you're going to boost your self healing, but not by that much. There's very few uses for having that spell and weapon damage. So you do get the max stats, and that's probably about it. So I don't think it's that good. We're gonna pop it down quite low. When we think about it this way, a dark elf gets around the same perks as a wood elf. So the wood elf gets the max stamina and the sprint speed. A Domna gets the max stats and the flame resistance. So they're kind of equally on that kind of level where they're not amazing. Next, we've got Imperial. Now, Imperials are kind of made for tanking, aren't they? They're kind of... the way they're created... The Imperial... The only issue with the Imperial is the fact you have to buy it. If you've already created a tank and then you're going to race change it and you're going to go and you're going to buy a race change token and then you're going to have to buy the Imperial, like, it's quite an expensive procedure. They are very good though. So you've got 2,000 max health and 2,000 max stamina. So the Imperial gets the most resource benefit of any race in ESO. So no other race gets 4,000 max stats added from the racial passives. You then also get the reduced cost of your abilities by 6%. And it's not just abilities. It's dodge roll, it's break free, it's your block cost, it's your all skills, whether it's your magicka, stamina, or health skills, and it's also your ultimate. So overall, you're reducing everything that you can possibly do on your character. So when it comes to the tank benefit of this, obviously it is one of the best options to go for tanking, because the biggest issue that tanks face is sustain problems. It doesn't matter what the situation is, you want to have good sustain. If you're a brand new tank, you need sustain to be able to maintain your block, to keep casting your skills. If you're a top tier tank, you still want to choose a race that has sustain benefits, because the more you have to heavy attack or cast balance for resources, the less time you're spending maintaining your up times. So no matter what, whatever it is you're doing, whether you're the best tank in the game or the worst, in reality, you should be focusing your attention into resources. Every time you're heavy attacking and every time you're casting balance, that is one global cooldown or one of those seconds you could have been casting a buff for your group, and instead you're not. You're casting something that is benefiting yourself to give you the resources to cast that thing. So in that way, the Imperial, obviously in the top tier. It also reduces the cost of your ultimate. Having a lower cost ultimate is beneficial because it means you can cast it sooner, which means you're going to be able to get more of your warhorns out over the course of a fight. Next, you've got Khajiit, and for this one, you have health recovery, stamina recovery, magicka recovery. You have max health, max magicka, and max stamina. You have critical damage and critical healing. So actually, the only issue is you've got like a low amount of all of them. But in terms of like the tank benefit, you've actually got a good use for every single passive here. So the recovery, although it's only 85 magicka recovery, it's still useful. The max stats, although it's only 915 of each, it's still useful. And then the critical healing by 12% is obviously useful. So when you think about it in that kind of way, if you wanted to go with something that is also going to be quite good, like with a Khajiit, you could switch that to be a damage dealer. You could switch that to be a healer. You can use it in all three roles. So if you want something that you can convert between different roles, the Khajiit is actually quite a decent option for doing so. As a tank, from the tank perspective, the resource benefits are not as good as the Argonian. And it's definitely not as good as the Imperial. But in terms of the fact that it's got 3 useful passives, it is kind of around about as useful as a Breton, I would say. So I'm going to rate that in there with a B. It's a midway point. It's decent, but it's just not the best. Next, we've got the Nord. Now, one of the common things you'll hear about the Nord is about the ulti gain. And I don't think people quite realise how ineffective the ulti gain is from the Nord. So when we look at the Nord overall, You've got the increased max health, which is nice, 1,000 max health. You've got 1,500 max stamina. In total, you're getting 2,500 more stats versus the Imperial that's getting 4,000. So you've got to look at it in that kind of way. You've also got, when you take damage, you gain 5 ultimate once every 10 seconds. So for you to gain 1 free Warhorn, it's going to take you 8.5 minutes. If you tell me that that is OP or really, really good, then you obviously have a different view of things than what I do, because that is not the reason why you use a Nord. Yes, it is a helpful perk, it is a helpful passive, because it's a little bit of ulti gain, but 5 ultimate once every 10 seconds takes 8.5 minutes to get 1 horn. So to get your free horn, that is a very, very long time. Whereas when you compare it to the Imperial's got that initial cost reduction straight up. So you're going to be casting your ults sooner than the Nord, because you're not getting that free ult until you spent 8.5 minutes in a fight. So yes, the Nord is good. You've also got the increased resistances. So this used to be stronger. It's not as strong now. It's 2,600 physical and spell resistance. But the reason why this is useful is obviously you're taking less damage. It's damage mitigation. It's the only race that has any sort of damage mitigation, really. So you've got that. So max stats, resistances, and ulti gain. This is like a good option. This is like one of the top tier options. Nord is especially good. Those resistances are especially useful for players who don't spend that much time blocking. The less you block, the more useful resistances are. In high damage situations, resistances are very helpful. In terms of new players with low amounts of CP, resistances are useful. So people will often say that the ulti gain is the reason to play a Nord, but it's not. It's actually the resistances that is why you'd play the Nord. So the ulti gain is like an added perk and an added little benefit, but it's so minuscule that it's not actually making that much difference. But I am going to pop it next to Imperial as an S tier choice, because I do think that if you were going for something that is very tanky and is going to provide you with useful benefits across the board, then obviously the Nord is going to be a good option. Another good thing that it has is the increased duration of any consumed drink by 15 minutes. This includes XP potions. So if you're leveling up a character, actually you're going to benefit from using XP drinks and being a Nord, because you're going to get that increased time on your potions, on your XP potions. So that's kind of handy. So that's a nice little added perk in there that's going to make the Nord that little bit of extra help. Okay, next we've got the Orc. And the Orc is kind of like surprisingly good in a way, because you are going to get increased max stamina by 1,000. You got increased max health by 1,000. When you deal damage, you get a 2,125 heal once every 4 seconds. That's pretty frequent. And then you've got the increased weapon and spell damage, which isn't that valuable. But then you do have the reduced cost of sprint and the movement speed bonus. And that is kind of helpful. So when you think and you're going through ad pulls and you're trying to rush through trials because you're going for trifectas, you're trying to rush through various content, that is going to be good, having that increased sprint and movement speed. The little heal is actually really, really nice to have. If you also think of when you've got the heal of 2,100 every 4 seconds, you've also got your health recovery ticking. That's a little bit of a benefit as well. So it means that you have to heal less. So if and they are quite decent tanks in terms of they've got the max stats in there. So they're definitely a decent option. They're not S tier. They're definitely not on the same kind of scale as the Imperial or the Nord. But I would definitely say they're somewhere between A and B, because the Argonians obviously got more benefits in terms of sustain. So I think it's probably on a similar level to the Breton and the Khajiit. So the Breton and Khajiit have got those magicka-based, those stat-based things, but they're not fully 100% up there. The Orc is kind of somewhere there, because the health can be nice, but it's not absolutely legendary, must-have kind of benefit. Okay, and finally, we've got the Red Guard. Now, people will often mention the Imperial and the Nord as being the best ones, because the Imperial for the reduced ult cost, the Nord because of the ult gain. and then the Argonian for the stats. When we think about the benefits of being a red guard, so you've got the increased duration of food, first of all. If you use them with sugar skulls, you get an extra 15 minutes on your food. Reduce the cost of your weapon abilities by 8%. Reduces the effectiveness of snares applied to you by 15%. 2k max stamina. And when you deal damage, you restore 1005 stamina every 5 seconds. So when we think about tank race, this is actually probably one of the best tank races in the game. If not the best. Because, yes, it doesn't have the ultimate benefits of the Imperial and the Nord. However, it does have the most superior benefits towards your sustain. 1005 stamina once every 5 seconds equals around about 12,000 stamina per minute. So if you are a brand new tank, the Red Guard is by far the best race to go for. If you're a Necro tank who struggles for stamina, the Red Guard is by far the best race to go for. The fact that you've got the reduced cost of weapon abilities, that's all weapon abilities, that's your destruction staff, that's your sword and board. You've got that increase, you've got that incoming stamina. The incoming stamina, right, is extremely valuable for a high portion of the ESL community. This is going to be far beneficial than having that reduced ultimate cost or the ultimate gain if you are somebody who struggles for sustain. Now, you don't have to choose a specific tank class or tank race to be able to perform like we mentioned already. But if you're going for something that's going to help you the most, the Red Guard is going to be it. And it just means that you're going to be able to get through content. If you block too much, it doesn't matter. Because as long as you've got your elemental blockade down, as long as you're casting skills, you're going to be getting 1,000 stamina back every 5 seconds. That is so helpful compared to any other benefit that you're going to get. So we are going to put it alongside Imperial and Nord because it is just an absolutely fantastic option for sustain. And it is also free. So when you think the Imperial has the sustain benefits by the 6% cost reduction, however, you have to buy it. The Nord has 0 sustain benefits, but it has the ulti gain and the resistances. The Red Guard has the resource gain and it's a base game race. The reason why Red Guard is better than Argonian is because Red Guard doesn't have any expenditure. It doesn't have the waste potential that an Argonian does. So the Argonian has a very high waste potential because if you don't use those potions on cooldown, you're not getting the benefits of your main racial passive. With a Red Guard, that is always ticking. It's always reducing the cost of your abilities. It's always working. You've got that increased food duration as well to kind of top it off to make all 4 of the racial passives beneficial. So that's why I put the Argonian below the other 3 because because of the waste potential. But overall, you can pick whatever tank race you want. People, like I say, will always claim that the Nord is the best. The fact of the matter is, it's not. It's really not. Because gaining ultimate once every 10 seconds is just not that useful, in all honesty. Like, you're going to get way more benefit from light attacking, from using heroic slash, from trying to gain major heroism in some kind of ways when you can with your CP or with different options. So yeah, overall, that is my tier list. So in the S tier, we've got Imperial, Nord, and Red Guard. A tier, Argonian. B tier, we've got that Breton, the Khajiit, and the Orc. C, we've got the High Elf. And then, last but not least, in the D class, we've got that Bosma, that Wood Elf, and that Dark Elf. So there we go. You'll often, if you go into a Discord, you'll often see Imperial mentioned, you'll often see Nord mentioned. Very few people are mentioning Red Guard, and actually, for the majority of players, Red Guard's going to be the best option. With a Red Guard, you don't have to use potions to benefit from the gains. Do you know what I mean? So Argonian is decent, but like if you are using a potion kind of build in some kind of way, like I do feel that if you are going with like a Nightblade that is doing infused potion cooldown with a catalyst passive and supping on potions, then the Argonian makes sense in that kind of situation. You have really got to assess your individual situation because people suffer with different problems. Like if you are struggling with sustain, then you should have chosen a sustain class. You should have chosen Red Guard or Imperial. If you don't need the sustain, you should probably go for Nord. Like, that is the way that I kind of look at it myself, is if you are struggling for sustain and you're having to cast balance in fights, you're having to heavy attack in fights to maintain your buffs and your debuffs, or because you're not able to block or whatever, you should have gone for sustain over everything else. That is the biggest priority there is for tanking. If you can't sustain, you can't tank. Like, if you're not able to block, you're going to die. So sustain is the most pivotal part of tanking. But if you don't need that, if you're sustaining well enough by using synergies and you're in a really good group or providing different benefits and you got sustain, then yeah, you would go with the Nord, would be the next like logistical option. And then if you're not really that fussed about the resistances and the ult gain, then from that point you just go with whatever you want. So that's kind of how I look at it in terms of thinking logically about the best choice. And there we go. But yeah, for beginner players, I'd always recommend Red Guard because it's just the easiest to play and it's got the most benefits for a new player. With ult gain, so the Nord's ult gain, when you take damage, you gain 5 ultimate once every 10 seconds. If you're fighting St. Olms, you can go 20 to 30 seconds without taking any damage or being hit. So then you're not even getting the benefit of the thing that most people claim to be the most beneficial thing about the Nord. The fact that we have ult teams in most situations, like ult team 1 will be a Horn and a Colossus or whatever. So there's no benefit to getting your ult back faster if you're going on ult 1 every time and you've got to wait till ult 2, 3, 4 and then back to 1 again. As long as you can generate your ult by that 1, having faster ult gain or slower ult gain, as long as you've got it back by the time your ult's called in the ult team, then it doesn't really make any difference. So it's just really overhyped is probably the best way to describe the Nord. It's just really overhyped based on like ancient information from when they did used to be better. Like when they had like a really shit ton amount of physical and spell resistance, obviously that was really nice. That meant that you could like reach the resistance cap with just major resolve and 5 pieces of heavy armor on a Nord. Do you know what I mean? But now that got halved. Like, the resistances got halved. So, like, that's become less effective. And that ult gain is just not that useful.